workshop, not a meeting. So it's casual, speak when you want to. Fight when you want to, eat when you want to.
Right,
Which is what I'm gonna do here in a minute.
good.
So we'll call the workshop to order and Emily. Maybe you wanna start and just give an overview of what's changed?
Sure. So we have a few items sort of outlined for discussion that were brought up at past meetings. And so I thought we could go through these in any order. But first, President Anderson, we had met with you, me and Brad, and developed some materials following up from that. So we can go through those if you want. And then it was also mentioned wanting to walk through the budget projection page a little bit more and go through what those assumptions are in that. And then one update with respect to the projection, and it kind of extends throughout the whole budget. All of our repayment schedules for Loan E, our latest loan, indicated it would start at a 7-year repayment and we'd have to request extending to 10-year. But MPCA was nice enough, they just started us on a 10-year repayment schedule already. So that saves about $10,000 a year for these next few years. So we can show the projections and everything that shows that updated estimated repayment schedule kind of stretched out to 10 years. So that's one quick update. And then we also had mentioned how we're handling the account coding for staff wages and benefits. And finally, the partnership and budget. So did you want to start with your items, President Anderson?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll maybe just give a little brief on what I was trying to get, and that's this. Okay, oh, thank you.
Earlier. Oh.
Yeah, I wanted to have a very simple, high level roll up of what levy expenses we have. That's on the left. And then on the right is the grants and the same thing. I asked to have the wages combined so that we know what the total is instead of all that breakout from items, and that's the small box below. That's just the aggregated total for that combination. So we have an actual number here. This 1.282 is the total budget for us for the year for salaries. I think you asked about that same thing too. So I thought this was they did a good job. I suggested that they look at the Forest Lake budget online to see how they present things. There's a nice delineation between levy dollar items and the projects. They call it projects, capital projects. And then they have different funding mechanisms. So at some point, you know, we might want to get to that as well so that we have a clear idea of how much funding is currently represented for grants and what might happen or what's in the works kind of thing. And I want you to explain that a little bit more, Emily, on projects that might be in the works for funding, but we haven't received those yet. And should we represent that on this chart? What's maybe to come as well, so we have an idea of that. That's for the board to discuss. But anyway, so if you want to go through this from your perspective and fill in the holes that I just might have created, that would be good. But that's the concept. It's just I wanted a top roll up. So if we wanted to not be involved in the details, you know, we've got a pretty good idea of what that is. But we can make decisions off of this too on a top level for anything that needs to be increased. So that was the objective, and why don't you go ahead? I'm going to get some over on me.
Okay. So this is kind of an updated version of what was sent out in the board packet last week. Just a few kind of tweaks to the formatting and everything. But really, in this first box, we are looking at, as Jackie said, kind of a simplified roll up of the budget. Only the expenditures which need to be funded by the levy. We've got a ton of other things that are funded by grants and other revenues. That's not what you're seeing in this box. This is just the levy expectation, the levy need. So for administration and overhead, as board administration, per diems and conferences and general office expenses, keeping the lights on, administration and professional services, that is funded by the levy, and that would be $405,000 in 2027. This is not including staff wages and benefits. The loan repayment, we've got $485,000 in expenditure estimated right now to be repaid. And then in the implementation fund, we've got the vast majority of programs is going to be funded by the levy. And so that's, the portion of the rural revisions, the portion of permitting that needs to be covered by local costs, such as government permits. They don't, they're exempt from fees. Monitoring cost share, all much of the programs that are not covered by grants. Corey, would you? Okay, thank you. Mike Kinney just joined, and he'll be made co-host, and he can unmute. And then when we move on to projects, a very small portion of projects is funded by the levy. This is really just a recommended $20,000, which is kind of a small amount, but I think doable for the kind of engineering and consultant time that isn't funded by an active grant. So pre-project investigations and stuff that we don't already have a grant for, but it's like anytime we ask EOR to go look into something for us, or we pick up the phone and call them, or we have a request for them, and it can't get billed to a grant, it's got to get billed somewhere. So having some local funds to address those requests that come up. And then for land acquisition and management, there's $2,000 budgeted for the cash match for a potential grant that Great River Greening had requested from Lessard Sands. They requested $200,000, which could go toward projects in our area, and we would provide $10,000 in cash match. And so we've got this split out over the 5-year period, so $2,000 a year. That grant still isn't confirmed, so we might not need to spend this $2,000, but we're recommending budgeting it so it's there and ready to go if the grant comes through. And then finally, bringing, as Jackie had requested, bringing the total staff wages and benefits out from all the places it's been coded. Here is just the total, and it's just the total covered by the levy. And it is the vast majority of it, of 1.2 million, just over 1 million is covered by the levy, but we are bringing in grants and other revenues that does cover a good amount of staff time. And we've been increasing that each year. So we're kind of on an increasing trend for covering staff time with other revenues. And so you total those all up and you get the recommended levy that we had suggested, which would be a 9.0% increase from the 2026 levy. So to cover all these expenses we've outlined that we don't have grants or other revenues for, it would be $2.4 million. Just going to pause there before moving on to grants and other revenues if there's comments or questions.
Oh, it's pretty clear. It's nice to see it this way.
Yeah.
And then kind of similarly here on the other side, this is that column that you saw in the original budget overview, but just kind of formatted separately, pulled over here. And it doesn't show, it kind of skips the administration and debt services because we don't have grants for those, and simplified to just show the items that do have grants and other revenues going toward them, programs, projects, land acquisition, and a good chunk going towards staff wages and benefits. And I can get into the details of those, the various grants and everything that we have. There's varying levels of detail on different pages of the budget packet. And I had kind of drafted a separate comments box. Are there any questions on that, or do we want to keep moving forward? Do you want any more detail on this?
The only thing, again, that I think would be helpful if, we've got the grants that we know, and so they're here already. If we, went down further with that box and did the ones that we are working on, but they're not yet awarded, that gives us an idea of a board of what other things are in the works for next year that
She's got it
are
right here.
funded. No, I know that. I'm talking about on this sample page here.
Well,
So all
it's
she has,
not gonna fit on there.
well.
You've
It
got two
can.
pages.
Pardon me?
You got 2 pages of stuff. So this is it in the regular budget that we're gonna look at.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be that detailed. It's just a quick overview of what's still in the works. There's room to do that, but that's my opinion. I
Okay.
think it would be nice to see that on this aggregated level.
Like just the total of it. Because here's just a slightly altered version, and thank you to Brad for creating these other formats. Just the simplified, there's a bunch of stuff in the work, as Steve pointed out, but just that aggregated total down at the bottom here is kind of what you're thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can do that.
yeah. It should
I
be
haven't
simple.
pulled that number yet, but
Yeah, and then just, if there's numbers to these, other areas or, just a quick. I don't know if you can fit them all in, but let's say there's 6 projects and they've got names or numbers already. We could just number them and people will know that those are the 6.
Well, she's got 3 categories, which would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Some, you can have active grants, you can have a total on that, you can have grant applications pending, and then you can have grant applications in progress.
Okay, well, that's even better.
So if you just have
And then-
those 3 totals.
Yeah, those 3 totals.
Gives you a feeling of where we
Yeah,
are.
and we can go to the back for the detail.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
okay,
I think that would be, would round it out.
yeah.
okay. We can add that. We were kind of just working on this afternoon. And so then down here, kind of separate, this is that third column. If you're looking at the budget overview, it's the sum of levy expenses and grant and other revenue expenses. That brings us to this total budget of 3.388 million.
Well, thank you, for doing this. I really appreciate it. I think the public is going to find this easier to follow. And then adding, the 3 grant categories, that we don't see here, Steve just read, that would just finish it up and be a really nice, overview, top level overview. Any other comments from the board? We're in agreement? Okay, good. Everybody here shaking their head yes. How about, the ones on the phone? Manager Baki, Manager Taves, any comments?
Manager Baki gave a thumbs up.
Okay, thumbs up, good, thank you.
President Anderson,
Yes.
I do have one question. Is there any leftover lasagna?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Lots of it.
Lots. Hurry over. What do you think,
Yeah.
Doug? You want to run over there real quick and?
As another
I'll
half
pick some up for
Italian.
you.
Good job.
In the future, we're not gonna tell you when it's here, so you're gonna have to come to all the meetings.
It's delicious. Okay.
I'm curious to hear more about that ricotta.
All right. Well, if that's good, we'll make those updates and we'll get this formatted and we can send that out after this meeting and print off copies and everything.
Wonderful.
So with that, do we want to go to our kind of discussion outline? There was some interest in going through the budget projection page in a little greater detail and walking through some of the assumptions. So I can pull that up next. So here's our budget packet. I've made a few updates to this one, namely that loan repayment went down a little bit. So we've got that changed. So instead of the balance the budget being balanced at exactly zero revenue over expenditures. We are positive 10,671, and that's just the difference of having a 10-year repayment schedule on loan E instead of a 7-year repayment. So we can kind of think about if we want to try to allocate that or to get it to zero or just leave it as it is. But just noting that for now. But just kind of presenting the budget overview page. So we've got the most recently audited year end. And so that's 2025. Revenue over expenditures, expenditures exceeded revenue by 900,000. But then we had that Clean Water Partnership loan reimbursement that came in. And I'll just note, as we've said before, this lease issued that just counterbalances an equal amount in administration, and that's just a function of the audit. It's that lease liability because we signed a lease for the office space, but it wasn't actually an expenditure, but it gets the numbers to line up because these are the expenses and financing sources you'll see in the audit. So the net change in fund balance was negative 226,000. And so you can see how that fund balance changed. It went from 1.4 million down to 1.2 million. We carry that over into 2026. And the 2026 column is what we are estimating we're going to end this year. I don't have a column for the budget. We're just keeping it simple on the projection page. It's just estimated year end. And we think that, with the grants coming in and some of these project timelines getting sorted out with more time, we will hopefully come in with a net positive in the fund balance and actually bring the fund balance up by a little bit, roughly 1.3 million. And so as a reminder, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I ask the question on 2025? Well, not on 25. On the I'm not sure I understand the lease issue of 2025. Why doesn't that carry out across the whole line, all through 10 years? You got lease issued 2025, and then you got a footnote saying that it balances out with rent liability in fiscal year 2025.
Yeah. It's because, so administration was 749,000. If you look at the audit, we didn't actually spend that much. That's $180,000 higher than normal. But on the audit, you show it as part of the expenditures because it is that liability. And so I kind of went back and forth. We could it's really just a function of the audit to get these numbers to line up. But theoretically, you could remove this and then you could subtract 180,000 from administration. The net change in fund balance would be the same. It just wouldn't match what it says in the audit.
Yeah, I can jump in there too. And that's basically due to the fact that we have a 3-year lease.
Right.
They're accounting for the 3 years worth that we currently owe.
Okay.
So technically we owe it, but it's just offset in the budget. So it's a zero sum, like Emily was saying, but they do that to account for it, just to put it in there as a line item to show for accounting.
3 years.
We had it, well, that started in 2025, yeah.
So that would cover 25, 26, 27,
Correct.
and then 28 though, it should be back in there, yes?
Depending on if we stay, I
I
suppose.
mean, there should be something.
Well, that's my question. Is it
Well-
in the administration line? This is just for information?
The cost of the lease is already accounted for separately, or of our actual payments.
And the administration end?
Yes, yes,
So
so
it's all-
our actual accounting, for expenditure is already accounted for. This is simply a transaction that the audit puts in there to track for accounting principles to say, technically you're on the line for 3 years.
Oh, okay.
But. And that was a new accounting standard this year, they just added, correct, Emily? That
Yeah,
was new to
that's
this,
right.
so.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, can we put that in as a footnote? Because I think if people look at this, my conclusion was that we're not charging for lease over the next 10 years, but it's up in the admin line under expenses, right?
Yes, yeah, that 180,000 in 2025 is offset up here, but we're still paying rent each year. So that is included in the
Right.
budget.
Yeah, we can come up with that.
So maybe-
Note for below.
maybe you could put a footnote on the 180 and explain it that, well, of course you do, you explain it in here on the footnote on the side, don't you? It's just that, so we should just say then, basically, that the auditors require a 3-year coverage of the lease. But the actual expense is in the admin line. That would clarify it, I think, Emily.
Okay,
You see, the issue with somebody looking for this for the first time, it looks like we're not covering our lease, even though that's really a big number. But I don't know.
Yeah, so maybe-
Does that have to show up in our budget at all? Do we need it in there at all?
Yes.
No,
we-
the auditing for the audit from the 2025 year.
we could remove it. I think
Yeah, I think we-
people
I
might
think it's-
question why
yeah.
total expenses
Because-
doesn't match the audit.
We have enough issues without having
Yeah.
something else put in there, in my opinion. So we just take it out, or, that would be fine, I think. Doesn't affect the projection at all. Okay. I'll
Yeah,
scratch that
I
out.
can do that if that's what everyone wants to do. I think it makes sense. I kind of was back and forth if we even wanted to include it, but which is
I
the
can
total
see
expenses
technically
won't
where you
match the
wanna have it,
audit,
but-
but this will remain the same. The net change in fund balance.
Okay.
Okay. Good point. So just
Emily?
looking at, oh, yes, go ahead.
If I may, the loan repayment for 2027 is 474,660 on this slide, but in the previous slide, it was a higher amount. I'm just wondering why there's a discrepancy.
Yeah,
It was
that's-
485,331.
Yeah, well noted. So in our original draft, we had Loan E as a 7-year repayment schedule. Because the MPCA had originally told us that the program moved to 7 years. That's going to be the default. You can request an extension to 10 years if you want. So I'm going to just quickly go over to the loan repayment projections. I'm showing the updated version here. But originally, we're estimating that with the interest in the loan disbursement, it's about $248,000 that we'd be on the hook to pay back. The amount was originally divided by 7, and so it was going to be a higher amount. But MPCA, with this recent correspondence about executing the loan agreement, they said that they would give us a 10-year repayment schedule right off the bat. And so that kind of helps us. It smooths out that repayment over 10 years now instead of 7. That number can actually go down. So that 474 is repayments on 5 loans here across all these years. And that loan amount went down by $10,000.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
One of my first meetings, we talked about a loan that we had that was originally at 10, and then they called us up one day and said, nope, it's at 7. If I remember correctly, is that accurate?
No.
They
No,
didn't
I thought
switch it.
Okay,
They didn't switch it on a loan that we actively had. So we did loan A and loan B, and that was it's all under the same program. But
Sure.
in between closing out loan B and starting loan C, that's when they changed the program. And so
Okay.
before we even got ourselves into loan C, they told us it was going to change.
Cost of money started going up, so they stretched it out.
okay, so they said the new ones were gonna be 7, and then now they've kind of gone back and said their 10's okay,
We asked them to, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think just for us. I think a
And
lot of other
so-
people are on 7.
The only reason I bring it up is that the chance of them calling us up and saying, no, we need to go back to 7 again, that's not gonna happen, right? Of loans we already have.
No,
Okay,
we've got a contract, basically.
okay, great.
Yeah, but good question as well. Okay. So back to fund balance. a lot, this is kind of a key piece of the budget projection. We're doing our best to estimate 2026 year end, estimating cost for 27, and then kind of having a general scenario for 2028 and beyond, which I'll get into the assumptions for. But we really want to be looking at is how it changes the fund balance, because that's how we pay for operating expenditures in the first 6 months of the year while we wait for that levy repayment to come, which is usually the first week of July. And so this is not, it does include certain dedicated funds like our debt service fund, which is dedicated to a very specific purpose. And certain parts of our fund balance go to the implementation fund, some goes to general fund, and general fund is just administration in the watershed world. What it does not include is unearned grant revenue. And this is going to be something that is less of a big thing for us in the future as these Clean Water Fund competitive grants start to sort of go away. But for example, right now, we have this Heath Avenue Iron Enhanced Sand Filter project. It's a $1.5 million project. We got approved for a grant that's about just under 1.5 million. And we get that first payment of 50% upfront. And so that's a big chunk of money that's just sitting in the bank. It's dedicated for this specific purpose. It shouldn't technically be spent on anything but that dedicated purpose. But it's making our cash balance look a lot higher than what our actual fund balance is. So the fund balance coming into this year is 1.2 million, but the cash balance was a lot higher because we have some of these big grants that are kind of sitting in the bank, but not showing up on the books in the fund balance, if that makes sense. So it doesn't include unearned grant revenue.
Those are dedicated dollars. So whatever that app is to be spent on that project.
Right. We get
So-
interest
Yeah,
on there,
yeah, we're getting our 4% per month,
that's nice.
guaranteed,
And what's the interest on the
no risk.
loan?
On the loan, 1.5.
We should borrow more money.
Yeah,
Maybe if it was your own money, you would, you know what I mean? It's like,
you're
yeah.
starting to get it.
Emily, could you explain what unearned grant revenue is?
Yeah. So it's really only with certain kinds of grants. It doesn't apply if it's a reimbursement grant, which a lot of these new grants we're getting into is that kind. So it's going to be less of a thing in the future. But unearned grant revenue comes into play when you get awarded a grant and they give you a chunk of the funds up front. You haven't spent it yet, but they're going to give it to you and it's sitting in the bank and you have it to draw upon to, pay your bills to do the project. But until you actually expend that money, the money that's in the bank is unearned. It's for that specific purpose, but it's not like other money in the bank that can be spent on anything. It's almost like it's not even there. It's not there until you spend it, as far as the accounting is concerned.
It's like a liability because you owe it back right now.
You tore it
It's not yours. Yeah, it's not, you didn't get it. You didn't earn it yet. So it's
Right.
like sitting there as a
If you do the
liability.
work, then you
Yeah.
can spend it, yeah.
I wouldn't call that a liability though, it's a prepayment, is what it is.
Right, but prepaid rent is a liability. We have unearned grants too, and so I'm totally used to the fact that we have them, but yeah.
And is that a government entity that you're talking about or a commercial entity?
Or nonprofit, but it's a government.
Okay, so,
Grant.
okay, you're talking about your organization, okay. Yeah, well, that would be the same concept. And what is your guys telling?
No,
How are you used to seeing it? Whatever trigger?
the unearned grant, we categorize things unearned grant, and then as work is completed, then it gets the revenue gets recognized. So it's not recognized as revenue until after you do the work.
Mhm.
But if you have the money there, but you didn't earn it yet. Technically, if you canceled the project,
Mhm.
you gotta get the money back. It's a
Right.
liability. It's like prepaid rent.
Hmm.
If they, if,
Check that out.
if somebody pays rent 6 months in advance, but then you kick them out, you gotta give them 4 months back,
Mhm.
right? It's just, anyway.
We should ask our accountants.
I'm not an accountant, I'm not pretending to be
Yeah.
one, I don't even play one on TV.
And just for added context, it's only, again, like I said, with certain grants, but with these Clean Water Fund competitive grants, like for the Heath Iron Enhanced Sand Filter, you get 50% upfront. It's unearned until you spend it. Once you spend that first 50%, they'll give you another 40%, and then you can spend that up, and it's unearned until you spend it. And then the final 10% they hold until the project's certified complete and the grant is closed out.
Are we able to earn interest on the unearned grant money?
Yes.
Mhm.
Is it
Dave,
significant?
they said 4%, Dave, that's why I said we should borrow more money, we're paying 1.5% and we're
Jim,
earning 4%.
Yeah.
Jim,
It's-
stop.
It's being averaged out at about 5 million, or 5,000 a month. It's pretty close to what I remember on you'll see it on our monthly reports, treasury reports, what the interest is for that month, and it's pretty much between maybe 4 and 6 is better. So the average is 5, I would say.
Sarah Anderson.
Uh-oh. Somebody's birthday's today at our house.
Is it your birthday?
No, my daughter's.
Oh,
I always do the cowboy thing. Oh God, that funny movie. Anyway,
Parenthood?
the pit, huh?
Is it Parenthood?
No, it's something cowboy.
Hmm.
But anyway, it's the fun guy. And his mother calls him every day on his birthday
Oh,
and sings to him.
City Slickers.
City Slickers, that's it. Yeah, so I adopted that same thing. It's been going on for decades now. It seems.
You can go ahead if you want.
I have to sing. I know.
Yeah, we realize that.
Not gonna do that.
And just a note regarding the loans, whereas some grants we get the money up front before we even spend it, the loans are completely reimbursement. So you don't get any loan dollars through this program, at least. Obviously, other loan programs are upfront, but through the Clean Water Partnership low interest loans, it's all reimbursement based. So you don't actually even receive the dollars until you can report the expenditures. Okay. Before I move on to some of our other expenditures, I want to just talk about the fund balance a little bit more, because this is really the big functional part of the budget projection is with anticipated revenues and expenditures, how are we going to be able to operate in the future? The fund balance is a big part of that. And here on this row that I have highlighted here in the first fund information box, you have total fund balance percentage of budget as of January 1st. So kind of where the fund balance is starting at the start of the year and how that compares to your expense budget. And we've long heard that there's this rule of thumb in the accounting world that they say you want your fund balance to be roughly 33% of your expense budget. That's a really rough approximation. It does not factor in a lot of different nuances like grants, like actual cash flow, if a project might be backloaded in the year. And furthermore, our budgets are often very high when you look at our expense budget, because like, for example, in 2025, expenses was 5.6 million. Well, half of that was one transaction to buy the Bone Lake South property, and it was 100% grant covered. So there's really not a lot that the levy or the fund balance needed to cover on that sort of transaction. And so when you look at fund balance over total expenses, it's really not the full picture. It's just kind of a rough rule of thumb. So that's why we created this other box here below operating fund information. And it is comparing our fund balance to just the sections of our budget that are administration, loan repayment, and programs. And that includes all staff wages and benefits. It excludes projects and land acquisition, which in this future budgeting moving forward is almost 100% covered by grants. So it kind of skews the fund balance percentage if you have this really high expense budget, but a good chunk of it is covered by grants. And so we thought it was a useful comparison tool to look at the total fund balance percentage of what we might call the operating budget, which again is just administration, loan repayment, and programs. You can see that percentage is a lot higher because it excludes some big expenditures, but those expenditures are covered by other revenues, not the fund balance. Does that make sense the way I explained it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the chart here separating that stuff out, but with everything, not just the received money, but for the authorized grants, I should say.
And so looking at that, you can kind of compare, we get a little bit, even still, we're pretty good as far as total fund balance percentage of the budget at the start of the year. We're between 30 and 44%. And that's pretty good. That's still the rule of thumb on the total. But if you look at what we think is kind of a more realistic comparison, the total fund balance percent of operating budget, we're more in the 40 to 50% range, which would be quite healthy. So again, the percentage, it doesn't take into account actual cash flow estimates and, big expenditures or other revenues and things. It's just kind of a rule of thumb, a way for us shorthand to look at revenue over expenditures in the fund balance. How are we generally looking into the future? And so that's why we felt pretty good about this budget projection. If we could keep, expenditures and revenues and the fund balance in this realm that we have identified here, we should be in pretty good shape.
President Anderson,
Yes,
isn't there a statute requirement regarding fund balance as to the amount we need to keep?
well, the fund balances are the board's promise to the public on how we're going to use that money. And so if there's overage in one area because the project's been delayed or something like that, and we've already got the loan the money, like Emily was saying, at least maybe partial money, that can't be used anywhere else because it's dedicated funds. There is, I don't remember it word for word, but there is a methodology that watersheds or anyone working under this fund system can, by board approval, I think that has to be unanimous. You can take money out of that dedicated fund and use it somewhere else, but you have to repay it. Okay, so it's not a permanent situation. It's just to help out whatever shortfall you might have somewhere else. So that is possible, but I don't like that. I think that we should allow ourselves some, whatever you want to call it, reserve. If that's offensive, then carryover fund. Some districts use that, but it's a cushion. So that if something comes in higher than we expected and we're spending more money on it, or some emergency occurs that we have to respond to, we've got that protection. And so I still am uncomfortable that we don't have one. But if we could start one again and have that called out in particular, that would be, I think, ideal. Doesn't have to be a lot, but some 10% cushion maybe on what the levy budget is. We will always want to have that as a reserve. We don't really have any other way to do it. The bank loans are, we can do up to $2 million, but they have to be for projects. You know, the bank is looking for projects to be the collateral, so. So those aren't really readily available like we thought a few years ago. So you have to be careful that you've got enough at the end of the year, not just that last check that we get around December 15th. Because some of the bigger, project invoices from contractors or EOR even, takes them sometimes a month or two to get their invoices in order. And so you could end up having if we have a lot of projects in the last 6 months of the year, for example, which a lot of them are, then you've got to have money to pay wages for 15 or 6 months, excuse me. And then also those higher invoices that come in. So it's more of a cash flow problem. You know, when does the money come in and when do you need it? And that cushion, helps get you through those few months. I think right now, are we close to break even or where are we with cash flow?
Do you want to take that one, Emily? Right now, go ahead.
We should be getting our first check in early July.
Yep. So presently in fiscal year 2026, yes, it's close, but the fund balance is not negative. So I think we'll make it until that levy payment comes.
Okay, the other thing is, while we're talking about funds, I would really like to see us start that preliminary fund. And I don't know where that's at. We've got the implementation fund, which is good. But that preliminary stuff that the engineers have to do to create the project and verify the project, where do we keep that money? Where do we put that?
So that does show up in our expense budget in several different ways. And we actually do have one, we've gotten grants over the last several years for that kind of work. Namely, the big one is that Sunrise River Headwaters Accelerated Implementation Grant. And that shows up in the expense budget under lakes, under Comfort Lake. So that's one example. We also, as we had suggested, about $20,000 of levy funds for sort of miscellaneous EOR assistance to seed grant seeking and project efforts. But then other than that, you know, grant applications that are pending or in progress, as Steve noted, are on that revenues tab. And I can create kind of a simplified roll-up of those grant seeking efforts, those pending or future grant applications.
Yeah, well, I think it's good for us to start using that terminology because we can't talk about it tonight because it's not on the agenda, but at the next meeting, Mike and I will give the overview of our time today at the Clean Water Council. And I'm very encouraged by what we heard today and what Bowser's working on, and that's all I can say right now. And I just think it would be good for us to start naming that and have it be in sync with how the grants are given out. Okay?
You mean it's a potential grant?
Yeah. It's already there in statute for under our statutes, but we're trying to get that to work at the state level. And it was encouraging. So anyway, I think we need to think about separating any of that money out into that preliminary fund area. And I think it would be the work that you're talking about now that you just explained, Emily. It would just be under a dedicated fund and match what the state statute says. So we don't have to worry about separating out a kind of a conglomerate fund. Be easy to report on. Yeah.
Okay.
Emily,
Yeah,
you do not look like you fully grasped that. Is that?
Yeah, I wanna say it back in how I'm understanding it, because there is preliminary project investigative work There is also separately, but some overlap in the Venn diagram, pending and in progress and future grant applications. Some of those grant applications would fund preliminary project investigation work. Some of them would be for other efforts, programmatic efforts, project implementation, and so on. So
It's the preliminary work that our engineers have to do to qualify the project, following the statute, Minnesota statute, and creating the feasibility reports that they have to do. So it's very specific. Mike can probably, talk to you about it in more depth. He, I think, understands it that way as well. But it also, the preliminary fund is defined in our 103D 103D, I think it's 0.711. That talks about that implementation preliminary work. Okay, so even though we expense it, even if we go ahead and pay for it ourselves, for example, that is to be paid out with the implementation and included as part of the implementation. So we're covered in two directions. So we'll spend more time. We don't have to do it right here, but it's important for us to call that out and not have these other things in that same fund, because they're not preliminary to a project.
I see what you're talking about now, and I know what statute you're talking about. And in some cases, again, I'll use the Heath Iron Enhanced Sand Filter project as an example. That statute is talking about this project ordering process, needing the feasibility study, the design, the bidding, all of these steps that we've been going through. And EOR has been doing that work for us. And that work has been getting covered by these grants. We got an early grant to do the feasibility through the Lower St. Croix, and then the final design and the kind of completion of being able to go out to bid was covered by the Clean Water Fund grant.
Okay, well, let's save this discussion for not now. Let's do it when we can spend a little bit more time on it, because
But you're talking about
yeah.
going forward, the future,
Yeah.
you're talking about collecting money that they owe us.
Oh, I asked for that.
Okay, but you're right now, but we really have this in the accounting system. Under projects, we've got $20,000 of levy dollars
Okay,
that will not be covered by grants.
Well,
So
right now,
that's where it should go.
but still put it in that preliminary grant, create the preliminary grant. The preliminary phase, if you will, on a project. And just keep it under that title so that we have this history of separation of
Oh, okay.
all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, because that is to be paid according to statute and any and every project, and it hasn't been in the past. We've been paying for it. Okay. We'll get all that tightened out at another meeting, Emily.
Okay.
So we can move on.
So still on the budget projection, kind of going down, we talked about the total fund information, fund balance, percentage of operating budget. The next section down is the loan debt balance. And so this is just sort of a countdown of as we're paying off the loan. So at the end of last year, we had outstanding debt of 3.6 million on the Clean Water Partnership loans. This is just kind of showing how those are getting paid off each year, and it's going down. And then you see it really start to go down in some of these future years, because we will have paid off loan A and B, which were some of the biggest ones.
What page are you on right now?
I'm on the
Are you on
budget section.
Page 9.
9? Okay.
Emily, that assumes we don't take new loans out. Is that realistic?
We think that it is realistic. If we can stick to this projection here, we can keep the fund balance percentage of operating budget in a pretty good place without
Okay.
taking out any more loans.
Great.
We
But
have to look at the numbers.
it
We have
requires,
assumptions built into this we have to discuss tonight.
Sure.
And if we agree on the assumptions, then the numbers don't lie. I mean,
No, and I hope you didn't take that any different than how I meant it. And that was, if we think we would be using loans, then we should show them in our projections. If we're not, then great.
right.
I was thinking this is just take all the loans we've got right now and just spread them out to when they get paid off, and that is it. But in the back of our minds, of course, we're gonna get new loans, so that's what I was thinking. Mike is posted something. The district is not currently working on diagnostic assessment in 2026 for Shields Lake because the district does not have any grant funds to do the work. So the work is being delayed. Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, it just kind of goes back to the last conversation a little bit without getting things too messy because they are complicated. So, and that's, again, I think it's important for the board to understand that there's some work not being done because we're choosing not to use a loan. Bowser policy clearly is not structured in such a way to provide that money to do the assessment work. And yeah, we would not even presently in 2027, we don't have it budgeted. So I think, just again, to be transparent to the board and the public that there is work being delayed because of some of these mechanics that we're running into and seeking a goal of not bringing on more debt. So
I think that's very important information. And is there more than Shields Lake that is being held? Because we don't have the budget for it? You don't have to think about it right now, but certainly before the next meeting, it would be helpful to have that list.
Well, that list is already listed as a potential grant, right? Because I remember seeing it. You
That's
talked about it at the last meeting. You're saying right now that we've got information back saying we're not going to get it. Is that correct?
no, but I'm just saying is that, it's not normal that a watershed district has to go seek a private foundation for grant dollars to do work that we believe is within the framework that should be funded through the Clean Water Council dollars already, but it's not. So we're working on it, but again, it's just, again, this is kind of mix of things out there and without getting the conversation overly complicated, but but if we were not to get the grant, I guess the board would need to think about how much of a priority would that be for Shields Lake. So
Yeah, it's a discussion item, so we'd have to talk about it and decide. I mean, we'd still spend levy dollars on it if we decided to do it, because we've got the decision power to do that, but the board has to discuss it and decide, I guess.
Well, that's the point of a reserve too, is to handle things that
Right.
come up that you don't anticipate. And who would have thought that Shield Lake would be showing issues like this after, we thought we solved the problem. So it happens. Okay, go on.
and as Steve noted, that amount that's going to be in the in progress grants section on your revenues page. So kind of rounding out the rows before I get into some of the future columns, we've got the loan debt balance. Jim noted, assuming we don't take on any more loans besides loan E at $234,000. These numbers will change if any of those pieces change. Then we've got sort of our projections of levy increases. So this is compared to the prior year. So in 2025, the levy increased 5% compared to the prior year. 26 was 23.7%. draft budget has a 9.0% increase. And then in this scenario, again, we'll kind of get into it, but we think that we can keep this fund balance percentage of operating budget in a good space and still have a 0% levy increase, just as a starting place. It could be a little bit more, obviously the board is going to have to budget annually. It's not a promise that it's going to be 0%, but it is a projection and it is a scenario that if we can get to that place, it is possible to get to a place where we could keep the levy flat for several years. And that obviously depends on a lot of things. Keeping expenses in check is one of them. Being able to win a really ambitious amount of grants is another part of it. So some of this is easier said than done. But, based on our track record, and if we can really keep to our budgeted expenditures, we think this is a possible scenario.
So how at a 0% interest, or excuse me, 0% raises over how many years is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now almost 10 years?
Well, Emily, can you
What
talk a
about-
little bit to what we built into the budget?
What
for
about
future years,
inflation?
Inflation-wise?
Yeah,
Yes. So I just talked about the tax levy. Earned grant revenue, we had set equal to 100% of whatever project and land acquisition costs we might estimate, and equal to 20% of the program costs. And that's really where a lot of our work is occurring. And in that budget and what I'm displaying now, 90% of staff wages and benefits fall under the programs section in terms of the accounting. Our work spans all sorts of areas, but in terms of cost projections, the bulk of staff costs would be here. And so that requires us to get 20% of these program costs covered by grants, but we've got administration expenses set at a 3% increase each year from 2027. Loan repayments are as they are. It's pretty much flat until 2031, and then they start to go down. And then we've got programs estimated at a 4% increase each year. And then programs, projects and land acquisition are kind of just general estimates, but in terms of expense revenue balance, they're just going to be set to equal of grant dollars. We don't do the expenditure if we don't get the grant. So to Jackie's point, 3% increase built in for administration, 4% increase built in for programs.
oh, there's also a big decrease in the project amount, which we anticipated because once you've gone around the bases here, all the sub watersheds, most of the major projects are done. And so that would just be follow-up for level B or level C items that need to be taken care of, or any surprises, like Shields Lake and that kind of thing.
Well, I think it'll be a little bit different than that, because I think what's happening here is that if you look at 2026, we've got $1.7 million in grants. Because we know what our grants are, we want them, and so, but you go to 2027, there's only 756,000.
Mhm.
And those are the grants from Comfort Lake and that, but we've got a lot of others pending, so I think as we get more grants in next year, that number will change and get bigger. And that'll, in other words, it's being funded, as Emily said, by winning grants to fund our projects. And that's why she's on a project line, she's only got 400,000 down there, all the way across, because that's kind of the bare minimum level. But as we get grants, that number could go up to 2 million, or it could stay at 400,000. We've got all this floodplain work to do. So when we start getting into those projects, they're going to be capital intensive. So we'll have a chance to find grants to spend some big capital projects.
What kind of percentage of grants do we win that we apply for?
That's a good
Emily,
question. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I've calculated it in the past and I don't recall offhand, but greater than 50%. But that being said, it might go down because it was a really high percentage when we were kind of at our bread and butter, which is the Clean Water Fund competitive grants, really high success rate with those. But as we're seeing, those funds are dwindling. They're offering less and less funding. And so we're we're expanding into new territory, and we're seeking new grants that we don't really have as much of a track record with. And so I do think that our success rate is gonna, it might not be so high in the future.
And the risk-
President,
Go ahead, Mike.
managers, well, I was gonna say it's not always so much about the percentage, but rather which grants and what the total dollars are associated with each one. A 1.5 or $2 million grant has way more impact than a grant that we might miss for 25,000, for example. You know,
Of
so
course.
without saying, but I just kind of want to make that known that so we've in the areas that we're stepping into some new territory, we have had good success with. So and so now we're kind of moving into some other ones with foundations and such, but and again, we keep adapting and evolving, and I think we're doing pretty well on that side of it. I mean, staff have, so.
Yeah, but the reality is that we are coming to the end of the big projects for our sub watersheds. You know, everything was highest priority in the sub watersheds, and then in the future, they might be just smaller than they've been before, but in the acquisition side, land acquisition, that's probably gonna go up. But that's a whole different category, grants though. Isn't that typical where we're going to go is for Lessard Sam money on those purchases for land, Mike? We wouldn't go under clean water for those.
Correct. I mean, there are some possibility to go under the one watershed, one plan, but that would be pretty limited.
Mike, I was gonna ask you. I'm sorry, finish. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
Yeah, far better with where we're at. I mean, there's also the DNR's version, the Conservation Partners Legacy, which is really an arm of the Lessard Sams. There are some others, some LCCMR, things like that, that we've not done a lot with, but it's another opportunity. I think we did one grant application over the years there.
So I agree with Manager Anderson that our water quality projects are probably gonna drop off, certainly will, because we got most of that work done. I agree with that. Unless we have a big surprise along the way.
Right.
But on the floodplain work, as we move into those kinds of projects, would those considered to be projects on the project line 5,000, and would they be fairly large capital investments? Based upon
Yes.
your experience?
Yes,
Mike?
Go ahead, Mike.
well, I was gonna say for phase 2 on Bone Lake South, we've built in some project work there. And so that's possible as well if we're framing it through multi benefits of habitat, which is the primary focus of the Lessard Sams. Which
But
again,
if we start doing some of the projects with the city, for example, and those are gonna be fairly capital intensive, correct? For floodplain control?
correct. Well,
Okay,
and that's
so
why, yeah. if
what
they
I'm
want-
saying is that I think we're gonna see the water quality disappear, phase out, but the floodplain work is gonna start up now, because that's what our 10-year plan's about, really. And land acquisition is gonna come up. The land acquisition would cover the Lessard Sands, like we've been doing. But the floodplain work's gonna require grants, otherwise we don't do it. It's simple as that. So that's what we have to work for. That's what Emily's showing here with her grant strategy. If you look at 2028, and this bothers me a little bit, you know, in 2027, we don't have all of our grants in, so it only shows 756,000 in grants. Most of that's probably from Comfort Lake. But then we go to 2028, we jump up to 1.3, and then 29, 1.3. So we were at 22% grants in 2027, and now in 2028, we'll be at 33% grants. So that's a big jump. So I don't know, you know, to me, that seems like the stretch and make this whole thing work. Because those are the tough 2 years we gotta get through. And to get through that, we've added some extra grant dollars in there before we have the grants. So in my opinion, that's a little bit of a risk when you do that, but
But if we don't get the grants, we're not gonna do the work, so.
we won't have that money and we won't make our numbers. We'll need to take a loan out.
Oh,
Emily, you don't, about 1.3 million, we don't have a lot of support for that yet, do we, at this point in time for 2028?
Some of it if we can, really to Jim's point, if we don't get the grant, we don't have the expenditure. A lot of that grant funds in 2028 in particular is under land acquisition and management. And that is a grant that we have in hand, and it's going to come online in July of this year. So it's really
Okay.
for that one in particular, the revenue isn't the ambitious part, it's the expenditure. You know, if we can get people to sign up for easements and acquisitions, we will spend it. But the thing is, and I'll just kind of show, if we don't get that many people on board, let's say we only spend $50,000 next year of that LaSarge Sands grant, that loan, I've got it tied to it to equal 100% of land acquisition, revenue is going to go down.
Okay.
Same with projects. If the project doesn't come through, you know, the expenditure is not there and the revenue is not there. The ambitious part, though, I think, is covering 20% of our programs with grants and other revenue. And we're taking steps to get there. And this Section 319 federal grant is really going to help us in the next few years. And having our adjusted permit fee schedule is helping. But I think that's the ambitious part, is covering program costs with grants.
what's the 20% of like a ballpark of what that 20% would be? Or does that, it depends on how many projects we do and their cost?
Programs are running about 1.7 million a year,
And will that, I mean, is that fluctuating? So is that,
not too much,
okay. So 20% is,
340,000.
okay. And our levy is 1.2. Right,
No, that's.
2.2?
That's just-
2.2. 2.2. I was just trying to figure out what's 300,000, what's the percent into 300,000 into the 2.2, so 2.5.
So that'll be
2.4 is the levy spend for 2027.
15%. Okay,
Although this year there was a section in there where we've got almost $100,000 in program grants
sure,
in this forecast. So for this year, for this coming year, 27. So they're making good progress in that respect.
Right.
We're getting more and more each year. So
but Emily commented about the stretch being the 20% being covered. What isn't a stretch, 15%?
Perhaps that's a good question. I should look at that. And I should say too that to an extent, some of that, if you don't get the grant, you don't make the expenditure, could apply to programs, because one of our big programs is the cost share program, and we are trying to fund that with basically pass through grants. Like we get a grant and then that funds our cost share program. We're not 100% relying on that right now. We still have some levy funds going toward like residential landowner grants and community cost share grants. But we might find ourselves, if we can't come up with that 20%, we might say we can't offer cost share grants this year, or we can't do a big curly leaf pondweed treatment this year if we can't cover it with grants. It's going to hit a point where there's just not going to be enough funding if we don't get the
Sure.
grants.
I just did some real quick math on what 5% is. And that equates to about 90,000 a year, and that also equates to about 3.75 for levy increase. Which just I hate to be, no offense, but I hate to be on Jackie's team about raising the levy. And I don't look at how excited she is about this. I also think saying 3% a year. Oh, this is gonna come back and bite me, I'm sure, but 3% a year to budget for, and then on an annual basis, come back saying, hey, you know what? We don't need to go 3% this year, and it's 0, and be able to talk to the Citizens Advisory Committee and the city and the folks, the citizens, and say, look, we had slated 3% for levy increase every year. You know what? We don't have to do one this year. And then now it's a kind of a hey, there's a win there. If we do 0 and we go out all these years on zeros and we have to go up to 1%, they want to know where their 1% is. Where's the 1%? We're potentially putting ourselves in a no-win situation on zeros. That's the only thought.
We don't have to really worry about this till 2028, because in 2027, according to Emily's numbers here, we've already got forecast 135,000 of grants for the program area.
Okay,
So that was half of the 340,000 I talked about.
right.
Pretty good progress the first year out.
Okay.
So I think we need to play this by ear. We're really only committed to 27. 28 is wishy-washy anyway, right? So, as we know, but I think the fact that we've got those grants already and staff has been able to find those grants is encouraging to me. So they're already halfway to the target, and farther than I thought they were.
Then
So
put it into the. We don't want to use reserve
do
for
what?
some reason. We don't want to use the word reserve, but put it in a reserve. That 3%, it's an inflationary protection too. So if inflation goes up higher than what we anticipate, if we're at 0 increase, we have nowhere to go.
Well, the reserve is the line item for the salaries, so
Yeah, I'm less of a
Well-
fan of the reserve
so
piece,
am I.
just because we have the ability to get the low interest loans. I'm much happier saying low interest loans is our reserve.
Thank you. Thank you.
And not an actual reserve. But the piece that I was saying is for the projections. I would rather be able to go to the citizens and say that we projected a very marginal, 3% or whatever, just to protect ourselves. And be able to come back on, and we only did 2 this year, we only did 1 this year, we did 0 this year. And then it's a win across the board. It's just a PR. It's just easier PR than it is to go from zeros across the board and go up to 1 or 2. We didn't count for this, and then now we're questioned on why. What do you mean?
Why did
You thought you were gonna have 0% increase?
Yeah.
Increases over 10 years? That sounds like malpractice, right? I mean, I can totally hear that's not realistic to have 0 increases over 10 years, but you told us that, and now you're not sticking to it. That's the only concern that I have. It's the same thing. I mean, I look at last year's budget and last year's proposals. It was 23% this year, and if I remember correctly, it was like 13%.
And then
17.
For the next year.
And 13 again.
And 13 again, right? And so I am happier to say, hey, this is where we were, and now it's come down. But I think I just think we're setting ourselves up if we project zeros.
That's a good
For
discussion.
future stuff.
We can actually put some levy dollars in here for future years.
Mike is. Thanks, Mike.
Mhm.
I just, Manager Shopper, President Anderson, I just happened to message Brad before he started talking with the same recommendation. I was,
Well, there you go. Everybody's on the Jackie train now.
well, no, we're just, we've had these encounters, right? And then, it's easier from a public relations standpoint to bring it down. Because we don't know what inflation will be. If we look at the averages, and that's what I suggested to Brad, is that we go back and look at the last 10 to 12 years and just see, in fact, like what from expense standpoint, what were we looking for to ensure then that we have a trend line that we can actually meet. So versus saying we don't need to be over 3 or 4% for administration and programs. My gut feeling is that we've been over that on a fairly consistent basis. So then it makes it even tighter. So
Question?
A lot of that was because we were building the staff and the programs during
Right.
that time period too. So, I mean, we've been pretty steady at 10 to 11 people for the last few years, so. But anyway, I think we get room to build
Yeah.
out here.
It's free for all, so shout.
Uh,
I think
do-
Manager Taves wants to talk. Here we
do
go.
do we not also get a bump each year, given the change in the tax base and the value of the properties within the area?
Yes.
Emily's saying no.
No.
Tax impact would go down for people, but we set our levy amount, so we get,
Dollar amount, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we get what
It's
we,
not a bump for us, it's kind of like a lesser impact for them if we don't change it.
If their property goes up, but some years, it's like this year,
Right,
my
went down.
property stayed the same.
Yeah, mine actually went down a couple thousand.
Yes, go ahead.
Manager, just for clarification also, as Emily stated earlier, when we put it at 0 was merely to show you that we could
Right.
get there.
Mhm.
And we fully expected the board to discuss, where they would want to be, whether it
Okay.
gradually comes down or to build, some buffer there, for it.
Well, we got
So
last year's,
obviously,
yeah, we got last year's forecast to work under, so we can do that.
Yeah.
Emily, you can, and we were showing negatives here anyway, so we have to do something. Otherwise we have to take a loan out,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
4 or 5 years in, so we gotta close those gaps off for sure. And,
okay, can we, is there anything particular, Emily, that you haven't covered? That you want to?
Just to recap, I can adjust these scenarios instead of a 0% increase, have it be a 3% increase. And I can do that even right now if we want to look at it. But that really, yeah, and those were our kind of assumptions going into these projections. So
Okay.
yeah, Jackie, back to you if you want to. Yeah, go ahead.
There are a couple of things that I don't see in here and, for, I believe it's gonna be later this year that we apply to the, partnership, Lower St. Croix Partnership for the, grant to do the, fish survey for, not the lake, but for invasive, park species. Is that right? Is that going to happen this year or is that part of next year?
That'll be part of next year. It's in the grant applications planned in future. That'll open up next spring and we'll be prepared to apply. And I've got
Okay.
it noted on the revenues tab.
Isn't there a fall application process for next year? I just want to make sure we don't miss it.
Yes, good question. There are fall rounds for less than 50,000. If we want to request our original amount, which was 55,000, it would need to go to the policy committee. And there's just one opportunity each year to do that. And furthermore, if we want to request from the FY27 WBIF, it's this upcoming grant, that one's not available this fall. So it'll kind of all align in the spring and there's monies earmarked for this type of work in that grant. We still have to go through the approval process, but
Okay,
that's the timeline. It's
so
well
it's not
set.
gonna happen. Okay, so this is in spring of 27, first quarter, we'll be applying, and that will apply to 27 work, not 28 work, correct?
Correct. It could span multiple years. I don't think we'd finish the whole thing in 2027. I think it was
Okay.
like 3-year.
but you can't put it in,
Stated.
at the grant.
Well, our application is to the Lower St. Croix Partnership. And I just want to make sure that we're going to be in this current biennium monies that are going to come. And we don't have to wait another year and a half before the next ones come. So I think Emily's explained it to me and I think that I can talk honestly with for the people on the Lake Association that, we're looking forward to that grant happening next year. And the work starting. Okay, all right, very good. Thank you. There's another thing I was gonna mention. 3%. With this 3% increase, did you do it already? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, it
Can
was
you read
pretty
it?
quick to do.
Yeah,
So
Can you read
3%
it?
from, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
3% increase from 2028 to 2035 across the board. And you want to, I think what Jim was suggesting was maybe decreasing the loan or not the loan, the grant revenues for programs because it was kind of ambitious. Something more attainable, like instead of 20%, increase it by that 3%, so do 17. Well, actually, no, it's not the same dollar amount for 3%, but Jim, is that what you were suggesting, is decrease those estimated revenues for programs to something more attainable?
No,
Okay,
not, it was just, it was just something to consider that if you were, if you were saying 20% was generous on, or that's not the right word.
ambitious.
Ambitious, that's the right word.
Optimistic.
And I was just thinking, well, if we take a look at that and say, okay, we take 5% off of that, if 15 is not ambitious, then $90,000 a year in additional levy would make that more attainable. And then what percent would that look like if we just added $90,000 to the levy as just precautionary to make sure we make our budget? And if the 20% comes in, then yay. And we don't have to jump again 2 years in a row. But at least, we're not betting on a miracle. We're being fiscally responsible and
logical.
and then if we make the number and get the 20% or 25%, great. We just don't have to raise it quite so much the next time. So that's all.
I don't understand the 20%. What do you say?
You commented about the programs. It was ambitious to have 20% of the programs being covered by grant.
Okay, the program, okay.
Not, is that right? Grant? Covered,
Yep.
20% covered, yeah.
Grants and other
And-
revenue.
Yeah, and so I said, if 20% is ambitious, what's not ambitious?
Mhm.
Is it 15% is not ambitious, since we're looking at the 5% gap?
Just in that program.
Just in the programs area, yeah.
Well, honestly, that's going to slide into the priority because we're in maintenance mode after all of our capital projects have been done. And the money for the green corridor, the floodplain, all of that combination is so multifaceted. The MPCA has loans for that kind of stuff, but they are fully reimbursable by employing green corridor concepts in that plan. In other words, leaving wetlands as much as you can. So those can be funded, I think, pretty easily because of the comprehensiveness of our report, our project, and working with all these different communities, and it has all those facets in it. And that seems to be something that they have. It's probably a priority for them because it's that loan is available every year. And if we can get 90% of it forgiven and treated like a grant, then between the 4 communities, we only have 10% to pay. And I think that's a whole different level of it's not as subjective as these other grants are. It seems to be routine year after year after year and comprehensive. Well, I like where this is going. I do. I think that cushion is going to be very helpful so that we can function the way we should. And that's being responsible to our public. We only have one function, and that's to clean the water and make sure the ecosystem that's needed for that is in healthy states and responding to public needs.
So if we did a 9% levy increase in 27 and then 3% increases year after year from there, that would bring the fund balance. You can see the percentages kind of jump up here. I'll focus on the operating fund balance, but by 2030, the fund balance will equal 60% of our operating budget. And by the end of the period, the fund balance will exceed the operating budget.
Fantastic. So we can pay down debt faster, we can build that reserve for emergency projects. Good.
Emily, you should send a copy because, you know, the other option is what Jim was talking about, is that we could take down the grant amount of monies we have in there for 27 and 28, which I think could be high. Take some of that down too a little bit, but that's something we could
Well, yeah, I think we leave it the way it is and then
okay,
deal with that,
all right.
because you never know what's coming. You know, grants aren't dead forever. I mean, we're just talking about changes. And if we can get relief from the preliminary funding that we've done on our own, that's serious money. I think my estimate actually came from something you did last year, Emily, was how much have we spent on that portion that we thought should be covered by grants. It was in one of the presentations last year. And the work I just went back 10 years that we were doing this project heavy stuff, and maybe 12 years. Anyway, it was about 1.2 million. And that's over time what that rough calculation was for spending on that preliminary activity that we had to do with the not us doing it, but with our engineers doing that preliminary work. So that would be great if that happened. And then going forward, of course, that phase of any project would be covered by the project grant.
Emily, I did have a question on line 3-004, which is non-point source pollution abatement. Could Mike or refresh my memory what that includes? Since we don't have a full detailed budget sheet.
It's overland, whatever happens overland, you know, like the culvert is a point source.
Is that Aiden's money for his programs or?
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
Yes,
You want me to take this one?
yeah, ag and shoreline cost share principally.
Okay. Ag is pretty small though, right? Because we only have the committee we're working with, right?
Presently, correct. We're trying to look to do a demonstration project potentially, but trying to seek grants for that. So
what I would recommend for next time is that we have a full budget sheet with everything. I know you've got them in the budget presentation, you've got a lot of the programs in here and projects, but let's get them in the format we're used to looking at and on the back, you know, 5,000 and 6,000 and the 3,000 detail sheets.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we've got that ready. We can distribute that in this next iteration.
Okay, that would give us a chance to look at that and then make any suggested changes or questions, whatever comes up. And then I thought that the format you used on workshop number 2, that presentation you did where you had the priorities and you listed some of the key priority projects, et cetera, was very well done. We did make some suggestions for changes on that. And I'd like to see some of those put back in there because I think we should use the same format when we meet with the CAC, for example. When you meet with the CAC to go through this, I think it's a very useful format that we have shot. But I think we should update it with the comments you received from the board because a lot of us didn't send our priorities in the first time you asked for them. That's why I wrote you that letter because I was going to wait to see what staff had before I wasted a lot of time thinking about things you guys have already thought about. That's why mine came in later. So some of that should get in there, I think, and we can adjust that if that's possible.
Yeah, I can create an updated, I just added a slide for those 2 main things that they boiled down to, but I can create kind of a fresh full one where it's all integrated.
Let's see, was there anything else I hit branches? I think so.
We're going to add the, 3 other classifications for grants pending. I can't remember them all, but.
Right, Emily's got that.
Yeah, so you've got that written down, Emily, okay, from the beginning?
Yep.
Okay. I don't see any other notes I've made here. Anything that's left over to build that 33%, that we're wanting to show at the end of the year. For carryover amounts. Is that something, show me where that's at in our current budget forms. If you don't mind, what page is that on? Is that on the first page?
So you can see that in the budget projection for future years or the expense revenue recap kind of early on. And you can
Page
see it
3?
by fund balance.
Yeah, that's page 3, okay.
So you got total fund balance at the bottom and yeah, there would be our original draft, there would have been no carryover. Well, depends on how you look at it. You carry over the fund balance, but with a balanced budget, you're spending your levied and estimated revenues. But now with the adjusted loan repayment schedule, we would increase the fund balance by this $10,000.
It's on the next page. It's all, it's.
And that would just be the debt service fund balance.
It's on 4,
Oh, great.
I'm looking at 3, and that's what.
I was at 3.
Yeah,
3 is not what she's looking at.
well, yeah, that was.
3 might be
The colors changed.
general
Sorry.
fund.
There's 3,
Yeah.
right?
General.
Page 3 is right?
Yep,
Okay,
Page 3 and 4. So she was on page 4 and towards.
okay,
Sorry. I
okay. And the fund balance is basically our bank account. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
For the most part,
No.
bank account minus earned grant revenue.
it's the levy,
Oh, it's
Oh.
cash,
yeah, it's.
it's cash from the levy.
Well,
Fund balance.
It's all.
no,
cash.
this is together, here, this is the better one to look at, if you want it broken out, it's this one,
I just wanted to know, because we keep using the term fund balance.
yeah, you're in front.
And I just wanted to make sure I understand what's the fund balance? What is that?
There's different funds. So this is the general fund, right here, for example, that's the day-to-day expenses, operational
Okay,
expenses. Yeah.
Okay, I just thought these were,
Here's this summary.
Yep. so these are all separate funds. Okay, I see. Every time I saw fund balance, I thought we were talking about the same funds.
There's a fund balance in the, on
This
the
here,
treasurer's
whole thing.
report.
Okay,
Is the general fund. Okay, it is operational expenses,
You could,
and then this
Picture.
is the grant side
but
over.
those are expenses. Fund balance is actual money.
Well, but yeah, but this total, we're doing a zero balance, right? And unless we add the 3%, of course, and this has to all change, because we'll have a little extra. And we could leave it,
if you look at the last treasurer's report, there's a fund balance table in there. There's a box, but then there's also a fund balance sheet which shows what's all part of that fund balance.
Okay,
So you can take a look at that, if you take your copy or get it from Emily, and you'll see it's all laid out, and that's what we do the cash flow each month. Right, yeah.
if we wanted to, we could leave it in that general fund. And carry it over, and it'll be a carryover to next year.
Basically, our bank accounts, you're right.
Mhm.
It's like all the levy dollars go in there,
yeah,
and then all the grant dollars go in there, you'll see them all listed.
yeah,
That's why some of those grant dollars are so big, I mean, they're
Sure.
right to borrow from them, if you need
Mhm.
a month's worth of money or something like that, why? Emily, I had another question on Professional services, we talk about adding a consultant cost to assist with new office space search.
Yes.
I thought we had kind of backed off of that for a while. Or are we gonna revive that in 2027?
We had, oh, Mike, go ahead.
Yep, well, just on the last one too, I think there were a few things that were stated, and I just want to kind of summarize again what was stated by staff earlier. And Emily, like the amount of money in the bank account is commingled, right? We don't have a separate, fund for each of the funds that we have on paper. So that's one thing. And then, so the fund balance is just the money that the district has in hand that is not dedicated to something else or unearned revenue. So,
Sure.
yeah, so we're engaging, I guess I am, in some conversations with outside funders. And again, so I mean, if at some point, there was some discussion early on about the district lease and things like that. And I know, yes, we can stay in our current location, but also the board did a really fantastic job going through the strategic plan and included office space in there. So that was one of the questions that some entities have asked if we had it in there, and we do. So my intention is to have conversations with funders, and we could look at do the pro forma of like, this is what it would cost if we just stayed in our current space, and then ask for additional dollars to do some additional engagement for an actual facility under that bigger effort of watershed research and education. So, and what would that look like? Recognizing that the watershed district is really centrally located for the entire lower St. Croix, right? Most of the meetings that have happened over the last whatever number of years for that have occurred in the Wyoming Forest Lake area, basically within the watershed district's boundaries or close thereof. Yes, that's a line item there that and again, if the board doesn't want me to pursue outside grants or donations for that, then I could turn my attention back elsewhere.
No, I just wanted to be sure it wasn't a carryover from 1 or 2 years ago. Sometimes, we have these sheets and then we don't clean them up and it just carried forward. So, but I think we should take a look at it again. So.
Do you have the time, Mike, to spend on
Like-
that?
It's like everything else, it's the 80-20, right? I apply my time to those things that, from guidance from the board that are meeting the best outcomes. So there's always more to do in any particular area. But I just think this is a long-term component for the district. And, it's sort of like for all of us, if you own a home, if you want to, you can sell it, right? You can move somewhere else. It's not like you're somehow signed a contract saying you have to be there until they put you in the grave. I mean, if you want to, that's your choice, but same with the building. People have the idea that like somehow if something happens in the future, but I mean, all indications are that the watershed district will not go away in the next 25 to 30 years. But there are definitely some opportunities for, we continue to have a lot of research partners and others that continue to show interest in collaborating with us. And I think it's an opportunity for the district going forward. So.
Okay, well, it doesn't cost anything. I mean, you're being paid already. The commercial realtor companies that deal with those types of buildings, they don't charge for that. I mean, they get their money from the sale. So, It's not gonna cost us anything except time.
Mhm.
President Anderson?
Yes, go ahead.
It is one of the SMART goals that we identified for Mr. Kinney is that we allow him that space to research this on the behalf of the watershed district, because we do want office space. We always have. We currently don't have the funds or the resources to invest in it. But as Mr. Kinney has pointed out to us several times, is that there are entities out there that can perhaps help us in this capacity. And so I think we need to encourage him to do that work.
Okay. Well, that's
I
another
would like to
score.
hear from the other board members too, so that we get some consensus on this, because this is
Well-
a big factor.
It is, and Manager Schmaltz has already agreed.
Right?
And so we need to hear from Manager Schottmuller and then also Manager Taves.
I would like to see us pick up the extra space in this building that's for sale if we need extra room, or that's rental property. Without adding a ginormous expense and a legacy cost.
The coffee
But-
shop next door, you mean?
No, I'm
No, it's upstairs.
Oh, that upstairs.
There's-
Okay, we looked at that before.
And, and anyway, I feel like that should be run to ground before we look at,
Mhm.
unless we're getting kicked out. Or being fleeced on price.
I think part of it was to look at the make versus buy. You know, because we're spending a lot and the rent goes up each year, so we're taking a look at the financial picture and see where it lands us and then go from there. Because I think we don't need an $8 million building to store our equipment in like the city's gonna build, right? With the sales tax. What we can do with something less than that, maybe we take over their old building, refurbish it. I don't know, but anyway, I think we need to find out whether the financial picture looks on that, Mike, so I think if we can get that and get some other ideas from outside, that would be helpful. We got a long way before we have to commit to a bond or anything like that.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what Manager Baki was saying,
Right,
is that
right.
it's still part of a SMART goal. Manager Taves, please go on.
Yeah, I think we need to encourage Mike to continue research. I always have a hard time with just paying rent and having nothing to show for it at the end of the month, much less at the end of
Mhm.
10 years. So if we can come up with a smarter way of doing space, I think we have to really consider that seriously.
Okay, sounds like it's unanimous then, so keep going, Mike.
Plus our staff deserve more space too, I think, those sort of things.
Yeah, well, and the public, needs some more space too. When we do have people, we don't have room for them. And this room is used for everything, permit reviews and all of that stuff, so. Yeah, I think it's a good thing to keep pursuing. We're not going to be spending any money on it. Just shifting some of your time around is all for right now, but that company that we worked with when we found Agua, they were really good. That insurance, or excuse me, the realtor company that dealt with commercial buildings. I was really happy with their work. Maybe contacting them or finding somebody new, that's gonna be up to you. Okay? Number 3 or 4. Okay, what else do we need to talk about, Emily?
Yeah, thank you, because we have about 15 minutes left before we hit the 2-hour mark. We had the staff wages and benefits account coding, we had MREP, and then I did want to take time at the end to circle back and look at our budget schedule that was approved in April and the upcoming meetings dates. So these two might be quick. It maybe we'll see how staff wages and benefits goes. I think it could be relatively quick because we had some discussion already, and we're looking for consensus on how to handle this. So I just I'll pull up the cover memo that we sent out. Just a few points regarding staff wages and benefits. Doug had brought up a really good point, just asking about our grant reporting. And it is super important that we are doing our grant reporting. However, the way that we do it on our accounting does not affect that. Our grant reporting is all done using actual staff timesheets and calculated billing rates. So the most important thing in terms of grant reporting is having those timesheets and having those billing rates. The way that we process the accounting and however the accountant's code wages does not make a difference for that. And so there's different ways we can do it. Our recommendation was kind of putting some of it toward the general fund under administration. And again, the general fund just comprises administration, not any of our implementation or other implementation costs. And then 90%, the majority of it, going to the implementation fund and just kind of living under the 3000 series under programs. And so we can still provide a roll-up that shows you, this is just the 2026 budget, the total staff wages and benefits is 1.2 million. And then the accountants can just very simply code it. 10% goes here, 90% goes here. It is a lot simpler than our current method, which is, 2% goes here, 5% goes here. It's a kind of a complicated formula to get it out to each program. But that being said, there are benefits to showing those staff costs for each program, and we can still show the FTEs on our budget, and we can still provide even another breakout to show, especially the staff work plan, how much of the staff cost is going to which programs to show the full cost of the program. So, this is a recommendation. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you weren't done yet. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
Yeah, so this is the recommendation. The board can do it however, but I think to Steve's point, and I totally agree, whatever we do, simplifying it for the accountants is going to save us time and money and have the reporting have fewer errors. If we just give them a simpler list of account codes, the process is part of payroll.
Okay, so does that add up to what our payroll is now? It looks like it's a little short to me.
26.
Yeah. What is this?
This is for 2026, and we can just pull it for both years. What we do for 26 can do for 27. Total staff wages for 2026 is 1.21 million.
Okay. Well, what I don't want to see happen is Washington County every year, once budgets are done, they have this chart that they want each watershed to fill out. And there's an administrative column, and ours was blank this year compared to all of the others. There was absolutely nothing in that box recorded, and that makes us look pretty stupid. So I don't want to look stupid out in the public arena. I want to be at the top, not at the bottom of good management practices. So whatever we do, we have to make it easier to find out what that administrative cost really is so that we can represent a true number. And I'm sure you have a copy of that for this year. I only get them from this source. I didn't make the last 2 years, so usually I'm there in person, but I wasn't this year. And I was embarrassed that we couldn't figure out what to put in that column.
President Anderson, so
Yes.
district staff submitted that information. There was another document that you had shared with me. I'll go back and we'll see if we can't find it. And where that information, where there was not in there, but that was not due to anything that the staff failed to submit. So
What was it due?
I don't know. I have to go back and try to relocate the email. I remember you sending it, but Emily spearheads this annually. They send it to me and her, and so I review it. It was sent in. It was presented to the county during the county budget meeting. So just for the record, I want to make sure that the rest of the board knows that that was completed and submitted, so.
Okay,
And presented at their annual meeting.
yeah, well, the board members should get copies of that document then, not just one or two of us, but all of us should get that every year. It's important to see the relationship between our closest watershed district colleagues. There was a separation though that I was talking to you, Brad, and Emily about, and it was something about administrative, right, work, and then I forget what the other one was, just
Right.
the aggregation of everybody else. How was that broken out?
Well, currently you break it out by 10% towards administration, 90% towards implementation fund, which is basically broken out to the rest of where the work is actually happening.
Okay. But if we were to consolidate all of that, it would be administrative work and then staff work or something like that. Is that what we're talking about?
So we could roll it all together into one under administration, but that would incorrectly show that our administrative costs are, say, 50% of our budget, which is not true. That gives the appearance that
Mhm.
50% of what we do here is administrative only. This gives a more correct view of where the money is being spent in the implementation fund. I mean,
Mhm.
Yeah, the budget, I think what you're saying, Brad, is on page 5 here, this format looks kind of what I think you're recommending. We got line 1,000 administration. You got 10% of the wages in that line. And then on line 3,000, which most of our costs are there, you've got the other 90% as wages.
correct.
So you only got it in 2 areas. And, some of it goes down to projects, some of it goes down to land acquisition, but that's fairly small percentages.
Correct.
Because-
This simplifies it, like you
Right,
said, as
right.
far as.
We don't have
Accounting
it
perspective.
cascading down to all the subheading, which is very expensive.
Correct.
So if we could do that, I think it's gonna save a lot of money, but I agree with you also. We don't wanna give the impression to Washington County or anybody else that it's like a charitable fund with 50% of their money going to staff, right? And not going out to the constituents. So I think that's an important part to keep in mind also. That be okay with you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just gotta be transparent. I mean, like anything else, just.
And as we discussed, Jackie, I think President Anderson. For the purposes of any board meeting, we can roll those into one number so you can correctly see what the staff costs are, what's going towards benefits. And we have those breakups for you as well as you asked. So that at any time we can present that to the board, so it's transparent, this is what we're spending.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is merely how we break it off from an accounting perspective,
Mhm.
so makes sense.
All right. Well, did everybody get these charts? You got them? Everybody got copies of this? Okay.
Right.
We have updated them and I'll update them still with the preliminary fund and future in progress pending grants. And then we'll distribute that.
Wonderful. Well, I'm very happy about this. The details, and your eyes are only good for so long. Reading small print, but, and then putting it all together. This helps just coalesce everything at a top level. And if people want to do a deep dive, they could do so on the back. And then adding those categories where we have pending things happening on the grant side on this chart would be very helpful. And details behind them. So I'm really happy with how this is going this year.
I think we're in much better shape than we were last year.
Mhm.
We've got things under control now, and I think, even with the 10-year horizon, with the changes we talked about tonight, it's gonna fit together better, I think, so we won't have to
Yeah.
scramble at the end.
That's right, and we're gonna look at this as an option, next time, we're gonna add that 3%, you just showed it to us. And that provides nearly $90,000 that should be adequate for any emergencies that we have. And we're not so tight, especially at the end of the year. Yeah, I think our books are gonna show better and And that's a good thing.
President Anderson,
Yes,
I'd just like to comment that I am in agreement with Jim on projecting a 3% yearly increase in the levy over 10 years. I do think that is a good idea. However, my contention is no loans. And I hear talk of the rabbling of the sabers once again. And that's going to make some of our public a little bit nervous when we even talk about that possibility. I'm going to stand firm and say no more loans. And when we get to a point where there's an emergency and we've got to do something, we have to look at alternatives. So I just want to make that clear at this point. The other thing I'd like to comment on is that this 50,000 foot view of our budget is really good. It really helps us look to the future. However, we need to focus in a little bit tighter and look at the cash flow reports that we are going to start seeing, hopefully in July. That is also one of the SMART goals that we have laid out, so that we as a board can get a better feel for what's happening month to month to month.
yeah, well, that's what, 3 years or 3 months old now? Yeah, and so I think, I'm glad to hear that everybody's seeing value out of that. And especially during these tight periods that we're in right now before July, it's been pretty tight if you watch that cash flow chart. So I'm glad to hear that everybody's finding that helpful, and we need to keep doing it.
So will we be getting the cash flow reports starting in July?
We've been getting them every month
We've been looking at
for the
them.
last 3 months.
No, we just got so far there's just been the one.
Oh, there was one?
There's been two?
I think so, yeah.
We've been kind of iterating on this, Dave, a couple of times. That's why it wasn't sent out, because we're still trying to make some changes on it, but I think we've got it pretty much in line now. So
Yeah, I thought
we'll send it out to you regardless.
probably wasn't January, but February, I suppose. Yeah.
Before it was officially put on the docket, I
Okay,
think, is
okay.
what with the delineation that
Yeah.
Tori's talking about.
But the formal, yeah,
Correct.
yeah, that's true. That's
Yep.
probably true. We were still working on formatting
Correct.
January, February. My apologies. But yeah, it's been a couple of months now, and that is meant to be a common report with each month's treasurer's report.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
You bet. Any other comments? Any other issues?
We have just
All right.
3 minutes left. I think if we want to adjourn at 8, maybe we push the MRAP topic yet again to another meeting, because I do want to look ahead at the schedule before we adjourn.
Oh, Emra, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Okay,
It's been brought up, and the board wanted to discuss it in a workshop setting, but we didn't have time last workshop. We're nearing the
Yeah,
end of this workshop.
yeah, you're right. And as I recall the conversation, Mike and Jim, you had with, Commissioner, yeah, that any contribution would be okay, just to keep our foot in that door, is that right?
Mike, what was your take? I stumbled on my thoughts on that meeting while you weren't around, so I'd love to hear your comments.
Yeah, man, prison managers, measure Shopping was correct. I mean, they just said, well, make any contribution. That's just to as a token element. And I think to be a partner, I had indicated that we had made such an offer of a reduced amount and it was not accepted, but we could try again. And then I think at some future point, if our foot is in the door again, be prepared. So Adam is collecting some data as to how many individuals, roughly are being educated outside of the Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District boundary, and then make the case that if there's ever an adjustment or change within the MREP funding program in terms of staffing, that, maybe a portion of the funding could be used to pay Adam for the work that he's doing, you know, really under the umbrella, because he's doing a lot of the exact same work that would be done by MREP, but it's entirely funded by the taxpayers of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, rather than through that larger mechanism of the Lower St. Croix structure of the which is now defined by, or MREP is defining itself by. So, but anyway, those are future possibilities. But yes, it was the staff indication and the commissioner's recommendation was to make a contribution.
Before we give anybody any money, we need to have that with a cover letter with some documentation of where the value is being provided, like you just talked about. You know what we're doing for that's helping them, and what kind of customization we're getting now with Adam's work here, which we weren't getting before. So I think that's pretty easy to put together. We got so much going on that it would be pretty impressive, I think. And then we can point out that a lot of this is in-kind donation from us already, besides the X $1,000 we give them. Suggestion, I don't know. I just don't want to send the money and not have any data with it.
Well, that's why we got out. It's because we weren't getting our $26,000 a year value out of that. And even having difficulty having our names mentioned on things that were specific to us. You know, I mean, it might be the last one on the list, if there was a list. So anyway, we don't have to decide this tonight. So this is something that, you know, we've got another month at least that we can kick this around at 2 meetings and then have a decision by August 1st. Does that sound good? It's not gonna be a big dollar amount, so, but we can talk about it in open sessions.
But we need to talk about the in-kind that we're making with his time and his outreach into the.
Well, I agree.
So, yeah,
I agree.
that'll be worth more than the money they're asking us.
I agree. I agree with all of that. So we'll do that analysis, even though we know how it's gonna come out, but we're getting our value, our customers, our citizens are getting much more value out of our focused work than we get out of MREP. And maybe what we do is talk about paying for the PR that we need to have from time to time on specific projects. A nice article that talks about like the launch of this big, massive, multi-year, entity floodplain work. So we can talk about all of that at a real meeting. And like I said, we can make decisions through July and then we'll be done. So August 1st should be pretty much the set of the budget, I think, by then.
Great.
Okay, all right, very good. Okay, this is a workshop, so we still need.
Emily wanted to discuss.
Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing?
Yep, so checking in with our budget schedule and outreach plan that the board approved at the April 23rd meeting. This checkpoint, assessing board consensus on the draft budget, identifying areas where we need to work toward. I feel like me and staff have good direction on preparing the budget packet, and we'll send that out. And then we'll kind of revisit, you know, messaging and things like that at the next meeting. The next workshop is scheduled for Tuesday, July 21st, workshop number 4. So we've got a little bit of time just because managers had some unavailable days and then we had kind of the holiday. So we've got some time in between now and the next scheduled workshop. The CAC is going to meet tomorrow in June. And then on July 14th. So I think at this time we'll recommend not really discussing the budget at those CAC meetings, but we'll have 2 workshops toward the end of July and then kind of address, you know, these objectives and checkpoints from the approved schedule at that time. Is kind of the sense where I'm at. You know, we'll distribute the packet. We'll meet again at workshop number 4 and we'll go from there. Does that sound accurate?
That sounds accurate. What day is the 4th? The 4th workshop? Do we have a
Tuesday,
set-
July 21st.
Okay.
Manager Jim, what's on the menu?
What do you want? Will you come? I thought,
Yeah.
I talked about this lasagna at the last meeting. I thought everybody would be here.
Oh, no. I never heard. Doug, did you hear anything about lasagna?
You were on vacation.
You were on vacation, but.
No
Dave was
wonder.
there.
We'll freeze some for you. How's that? Is there a freezer here? He'll have your name on it.
We'll put it on a stick for you. Make you feel comfortable.
Okay, I don't think we have to be formal here, so without objection, I will call the meeting over for tonight.
Sounds good.
Any objections?
Nope.
All right, boom, boom. There it goes. We're done
Thanks, everyone.
It's a technical
night.
term.
Good meeting, Emily. Thank you for organizing.
from Roberts.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. See you guys.